a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's episode of Perspectives, we're talking about distractions. What are the distractions that you currently have in your life right now? What are those distractions? And, a lot of times we don't even realize what the distractions are, because sometimes the distractions can come in forms that we don't even realize is a distraction. It's interesting because we're so intelligent. We're so intelligent, and we can actually do so many things, and we can create it in such a way that we're consciously not even aware of it. Subconsciously, yes, but consciously not even aware of it. And so we can create these distractions to offset what we're doing in our life because, one, maybe we don't want to deal with what's happening in our life. Maybe we want to ignore the big issues in our life. And sometimes these distractions help us to get off target so we don't even have to deal with our own life. And so we're going to be talking about distractions, what the distractions are, why we create these distractions. Don't miss Dr. Ed Cara. He'll be joining us in studio from Body Lounge Park Cities, as well as Reggie Harvey will be live in studio talking about his perspective on distractions and his personal distractions that he's dealt with in his day-to-day life. And, it's going to be interesting because as we talk about these distractions, I'm also going to explain how you can recognize them and how you can get to the core of why you created these distractions in the first place. Okay, well, let's start this conversation. Okay, what are distractions? Well, I think many of us know what distractions are. We know how we get distracted. A lot of us talk about ADD, right? Attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyper disorder, and how we're getting distracted by somebody talking in the back room or somebody doing this or something happening or a noise or a squirrel ran by, Ooh, squirrel. But we're not really talking about that type of ADD distractions. But we kind of are in a way because all distractions are very similar. The thing about distractions is that distractions are there to get us off target from what we're doing. Right? They're the things that can get us off target. They can get us off our purpose. They can get us into another realm of thought or really on the sidelines in that thinking mind, because distractions really serve that purpose to take us off target from our purpose. Okay, so that's what a distraction is. So then you're probably asking me, hey, Ashley, I get it, but what kind of distractions would take us off purpose? Okay, well, that's a good question. The kind of distractions that take us off purpose are, well, they're very intricate. Some of them are not so intricate, but they're very powerful. Okay, so let's talk about the powerful distractions first, and then we'll talk about the more intricate ones later. The powerful distractions, well, and many of us know the power of these distractions. The powerful ones, drugs, are a good, powerful one. Alcohol, that's a big one. Pharmaceutical, right? Those are really powerful distractions. They're very powerful distractions because what happens here is a drug or an alcohol or a pharmaceutical can really take us off target, take us off our purpose, right? We can use that to take us off target. We can use that to really put us into a different frame of mind. It can also serve to fill a void more often than not that we feel that we need to be filled. So whether it's drugs or alcohol, even food can be a necessary distraction. And a lot of people don't realize that the addiction to food is very common. And the reason why it is because it's so available. Think about it. Everywhere you go, there's food. It's not like it's illegal. It's not like you go to jail if you have some food in your car or some food in your wallet. The thing is that it's food. And a lot of folks are addicted to food because there's a void that they have. There's something that they haven't filled within them. And they use food to do it, just like we're doing with alcohol when we drink, just like pharmaceutical drugs when we're using those, or drugs themselves to fill that void, right? To fill that void. And that's a huge distraction. Because when you're trying to create something in life, anytime you add alcohol to it, well, usually that's not going to work. When you're trying to create something or trying to write a book or trying to be, responsible, trying to raise your kids, even though you're a single parent, or trying to take responsibility for your life. When we add drugs and alcohol into it, this is a massive distraction that takes us off target. We begin to lose ourselves in the process, right? We lose our own identity in the process. So we definitely are not able to achieve that responsibility. We're definitely not able to, take on and challenge ourselves and create that purpose. What happens is we get off target. What happens is we lose our way. We lose our identity. We lose who we are inside because we're trying to fill this void with something that's taking us off from our emotional target, our spiritual target, who we are as a person, our beliefs, our values. Because what happens, and I think anybody that's out there listening right now has felt it before, where, maybe you decided to have a drink, maybe a couple of drinks. Can't stop at a couple of drinks. You go out, you're doing whatever. You wake up the next day, you feel horrible. You feel awful. But on top of feeling bad, you feel guilt, you feel shame. You feel sadness because you haven't created or done what you want to do. You have these things that you want to create in life, but you're nowhere near getting that done, because when you try to get to that, when you try to get and work on that stuff, there always seems to be this distraction there that's calling your name. That's a very powerful distraction. An intricate distraction, because I think that there's powerful ones and then there's powerfully intricate distractions. And an intricate distraction is one of those that we actually create, and it's not in a thing as it normally is within a person. Okay? So the more intricate distractions we have, they come in the form of a human being. Okay, and let me give you an example for that. Because a lot of times, many of us have a lot of good things going on. We're working on our responsibility. Life's going pretty good. There's some definite things that you want to work on. There's some definite feelings of some loss or loneliness or misdirection or wondering what one's purpose is. But in the end, you're walking through the process. You're dealing with it. A lot of times we're walking through the motions. A lot of times we're not really focused on the purpose. I mean, we might, but we actually don't believe in the purpose. And so we're kind of walking through those motions. We're trying to take care of the kids, or we're trying to take care of the marriage. And maybe we find a distraction, whether that's in another person. Maybe we step outside of the marriage and find a distraction, and that distraction begins to take over our life. Maybe we find the distraction in a male or a female. Maybe somebody that seems to be the victim that needs our help. Maybe someone that has a problem or an issue. Maybe someone that we think we can help. And maybe we can't, maybe we can. Usually we don't really have the ability to help them, but we go into it anyway. And a lot of times we go into these distractions because it distracts us from our own issues. It distracts us from our own problems, from the things that we need to create or the things that we need to do in our own life. It's always interesting how someone else's problems are so easy to fix because they're not our problems. Isn't that interesting? When you have somebody that's telling you about their problems and you hear them and it sounds so easy to fix. I know we've been there before, and you're thinking, what the heck? It's not that hard. I mean, all they have to do is this, and that, and they're done. The funny thing is that the problems that you're telling someone else about, they're thinking the same exact thing about. They're thinking the same exact thing about, okay? No questions whatsoever. They're thinking the same thing because your problems seem extremely easy to them as well. But again, remember, someone else's problems is also an intricate distraction as well. And why it's so intricate is it seems so easy. We look at someone else's problems and we see, well, we can fix this, and we can tweak that, and if they just do this or they just do that, they're going to be fine. It's easy breezy. And so we begin to try to help them to solve their problems. But it's interesting because it's not our problem to solve. It's quite the opposite. It's not our problem to solve. This is not for us to determine. This is not for us to fix. We must fix our own issues and our own problems. And we have to begin to realize when these distractions And we sit there and we say, well, so-and-so, I mean, all I do is I try to take care of this person, or I'm trying to do this, or I'm trying to do that, or they're causing all these issues in my life, or they're causing all this pain in my life, or they're doing this, or they're doing that. But are they causing all this pain in your life? Are they causing all these problems in your life, or is it you causing all these problems in your life? I mean, and I want you to really think about that, because that's some powerful stuff. Is it you? And I think it might be. And that's what's so interesting, is that when we think about life in that kind of context, in that perspective, we're able to really analyze our distractions and understand what we're creating in our own life and doing to ourselves. When I return, I'll be talking more about distractions, understanding what they are and what forms they come in. Dr. Ed Cara will be joining us in studio from Body Lounge Park Cities. And don't forget, check out my YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, put in Ashley Burgess, Ashley, Berges. Find new video content every single week on issues that matter to you. Stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm analyzing the distractions that are in our life. What are the distractions that are in your life currently? What are some of the powerful distractions as well as some of the intricate distractions? Right before the break, I've been talking about the intricate distractions. We create these distractions, and these distractions are other people. Right? Maybe we feel like we can save someone. Maybe we think that we can do this or we can do that, or we can help somebody do this or we do that, and we find a woman or a man or whatever, and we put all our energy into that person. We try to fix them, or we find them and we think we can change them. And instead of really focusing on our own life and helping our own life and trying to change our own life, we end up focusing on their life and trying to do what we can for their life to make their life better. But in reality, is it that we really care that much, or is it because we're actually avoiding doing our own work? You know, I know one thing. When I have a project sometimes to do, and I bet you can feel this with me, when you have a big work project or you have something, and a lot of times, you know, when I'm on the weekends trying to work on a project that is just it's taking so much work. You know, I'll go from the office to the house, and I'll get to the house, and I'll sit there for a little while because I think that a change of pace will help give me, you know, this creative juices that I need to stimulate my thought on, you know, making this plan work or creating this plan. And it's funny because, you know, you get close to getting it to working on it, and all of a sudden you look around, you're like, wow, I could really do some laundry. Wow, look at that. I had no idea how I really need to wash that, or I really need to vacuum. And the next thing you know, you're in there doing laundry, you're vacuuming the house, you know, you're cleaning the windows, you're doing all this stuff, and hours later you realize you haven't done anything with the project. And it's like, oh, God, I mean, did we just think the project was going to go away? Yeah. That's why we're doing all this procrastination. But see, we can actually procrastinate and distract ourselves with people. Isn't that interesting? Very valuable information on today's show, because many of us are doing this, but we don't even know we are. Okay, many of us are doing this, but we don't even realize we are, because we have this guise around it. We've told ourselves that we're doing the right thing, or we're being a savior to somebody. And not only the savior, but we also have a little bit of the ego, right? The ego is saying to us, we can solve this person's problems better than they can solve their own problems. That's what ego says, okay? And so there we are in ego, having a blast, thinking about this stuff, when in reality, we have to get outside of ego and realize that, you know what, we probably can't solve this person's problems, but better yet, it's not for us to solve because we have our own problems that we're supposed to solve. Otherwise, we would have been given their problems. And so we really need to refocus our energy in our life and refocus that so we can get off this distraction and really get into purpose. I find that when we talk about psychological issues, when we talk about spiritual issues, when we talk about the stuff that really helps us with relationship issues and really overcoming that adversity, another big thing that we want to talk about is overcoming our physical roadblocks. And in order to overcome our physical roadblocks, we have to understand them. And we have to actually get with somebody that understands us and has been there and can really help us. Joining me live in studio, Dr. Ed Cara. Dr. Ed is a non-surgical sports medicine specialist and the co-owner of Body Lounge Park Cities and also a good friend. Dr. Ed, great to have you in studio today.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you.
I find a lot of times when people get into a certain profession, especially the medical profession, there's usually a personal reason, a personal story, or something that happened to them. Is there anything like that with your background, Ed?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was a frontline medic in the Army Reserve and was doing my time in an emergency department and spending a lot of time with physicians. And I was really, my goal was to go to medical school as an undergrad. And at the time I was wrestling, and I got into my junior year. And I'll never forget, it was a specific date, December 30th, 1994. Not that it had any, effect on my life. I can still remember the date, the time, everything. And I tore 3 out of the 4 ligaments in my right knee. And at the time, there really wasn't an alternative to surgery. I was told, if you want to basically ever wrestle again, if you want to compete your senior year, you're going to have surgery. Unfortunately, I wouldn't have had enough time to get back and train. The rehab process was going to take a long time. And so, the chances of me having a surgery, like let's say in January or February, and then being back for the next season was going to be pretty slim. And so I had some really great mentors, my athletic trainer, my strength coach, my chiropractor. A lot of them were pushing me towards going without the surgery and just trying to rehab it on my own, doing just lots of strengthening, lots of manual therapy. And so that's what I chose to do. I chose to put off surgery because I could always have surgery. That was always the alternative at the end and at the end game. So I just went to hard work with great advice and great leadership. I was wrestling again with 4 months with a brace on, but within 4 months I was back on the mat. And it really showed me that there are alternatives. There's always these other options that we can do that are non-surgical and non-pharmaceutical. And that really got me interested in doing something different than going to medical school because I really wanted to be part of the teams and be in the locker room and really help people get back to activity. And so that's what pushed me to become a strength and conditioning coach, an athletic trainer, and a chiropractor, and then pursue my PhD in sports medicine, is to really help people get back to activity like those people helped me.
That's very powerful. Dr. Ed, I find that a lot of folks, especially us that are active, sports-minded, we want to keep conditioned, we want to run, we want to do that stuff on the weekends or during the week. When you go to a lot of doctors, sometimes they tell you, well, you know what, you just got to stop doing that. You run, but you got to just stop doing that because of whatever injury. And that can be kind of a death sentence for some of us when you say, well, I can't ever run, I can't do this kind of stuff. What is your methodology and your perspective on that when it comes to somebody that comes in and they're having pain, they're having these types of issues? How do you help them to at least try to have that quality of life back to be able to do what they love to do?
Well, I think a lot of people come to see me because I tell them to continue being active, but we just modify, and I guide them into doing things. And maybe it's not exactly what they were doing before until they improve their capacity. In my opinion, all injuries really come down to a very simple philosophy, is that we ask our body to do more than what it can tolerate. And you have 2 choices. You can either decrease what you're asking of it, which is what you were alluding to, or you can increase the capacity of your body, meaning getting stronger, getting bigger, whatever it is. And so I adhere to that philosophy all the time with the usual recommendation of increasing your capacity. Let's increase your body's ability to move better, to feel better, get stronger, so that way we can get back to those activities people like. Because let's face it, most people are not active enough. And it's really, I feel like, my job to get people feeling like they can be more active and get back to those activities that they like so they can continue the lifelong pursuit of health.
I love your perspective, Dr. Ed. And for our listeners who are interested in learning more about you, where do they find you?
They can find me at our website, bodyloungeparkcities.com. And there they can link to our social media, and I post things about different conditions and how to prevent injury and really just about things that are interesting that are coming into the clinic.
Thank you, Dr. Ed. I look forward to seeing you next week in studio. You know, I think it's important because a lot of times we try to work on one thing, like we work on our relationship or our marriage, or we work on our going to the gym, but we're not working on anything else. And we really got to focus on putting all that together because we want to be a well-balanced individual. We want to be healthy. We want to be grateful. We want to have happiness. We want to have joy, but we also want to feel good too. And that's one of the ways that we can really get there as well, is really taking care of our body and being able to talk to someone like Dr. Ed and work with him to really understand that. You know, when we're talking more about distractions today, because I think distractions are so powerful, and they come in so many different forms. And, you know, one of the reasons why we create them is because we don't want to deal with our own issues. It's a lot easier, like I was saying earlier, to deal with someone else's problems, right? And, you know, a lot of times it's to fill that void. Even, you know, a lot of people talk about how alcohol and drugs and food are there to fill a void. But really, if you think about it, people are there to fill a void. There's a reason why we talk about codependency, okay? Because what happens is when we get codependent in a relationship, no matter how bad the relationship has gotten, no matter how toxic the relationship is, we still hold on to it because of that acceptance, because of the desire to have acceptance, because of the desire to want to be accepted, to be approved by the other person, when we're missing the boat on the whole entire acceptance approval thing. Because that can only come from one place. And we'll talk about that later on in the hour. And joining me when I come back from break, Reggie Harvey will be in studio to talk about his perspective on distractions and the distractions that he's dealt with in his own life. And then later on, I'm going to talk to you about the ways that you can really figure out what your distractions are and begin to eliminate those as soon as possible. Stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives with me, your host, Ashley Burgess. Will be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we've been talking about distractions. What distractions exist in your life right now? But better yet, why are they there? You know, a lot of times we realize that we have distractions, whether it's alcohol or drugs or pharmaceuticals or just the drama in our life. But sometimes we get very intricate. We get very detailed, sophisticated about it. We bring people into our life or we meet people and we have them in our life and we spend so much time with them. We get inundated with them, whether we're trying to save them or maybe fix them or we see something within them. And it takes us off target and distracts us from living our life. And there's a lot of reasons why we do that. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. But right now, I really want to hear Reggie Harvey's perspective on the concept of distractions. You know, Reggie is a friend of mine. He's a survivor of a near-death illness. He's also the author of Anatomy of a Patient. And this book is available right on Amazon. Reggie, great to have you in studio today. How are you doing?
Hey, Ashley, I'm doing well. Thank you.
So, you know, we're talking about distractions. You know, we were talking right before, right on the break. What are the distractions that you found yourself getting into in your day-to-day life?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed in my work habit is that I'm somewhat of a over-functioning person. I generally take on slightly more than what I should in order to push myself. But that I pretty well figured out how to manage. What I am really vulnerable to, or we used to be vulnerable to, was the shiny bright object. And that shiny bright object was the potential that I would see in other people, whether it was their talent or their intellect or their comprehension or something like this. I would become fascinated very easily. And it sort of was a way for me to find a little bit of a respite from my own manic behaviors. But at any rate, I began to realize that I was using a lot of my own personal time to follow up on other people's potentials, things that they said they always wanted to do but were struggling to get them done, these kinds of things. And I always had a rich resource or cache of resources to fall back on. So I would dip into my resource bag and pull out, well, have you met this person here, or did you know about this opportunity over here? Trying to line them up with what they claimed they wanted to do. What took me a while to figure out is many of the people only liked talking about what they wanted to do, even if they had the talent to do it. But they didn't really want to make commitments to actually achieve anything or take the very next step. And I'm busy running around like an idiot trying to pull all this stuff together and hook them up with these people and set up meetings and follow up with people and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, why am I doing this? I couldn't tell myself why. And then finally I just stopped. And that was one of the biggest lessons I ever learned. Usually when you get distracted with a lot of superfluous behavior and activity, the best thing to do is just stop and breathe and watch to see if any part of your world falls apart. And if none of it does, then you sort of gently begin piecing it back together again. And the long-term lesson I learned from this is it doesn't matter how much potential people allude to or exhibit or actually have. It's not my responsibility that they achieve their potential. I may wish for them to do that. I may champion them a bit to do this, but I can never allow their dreams to replace my own. That's a dangerous thing to do. And out of that, I think I came up with a mantra that it's one thing to have a healthy self-interest, and it's another thing to be selfish. And a lot of people confuse the two and think, oh, if I prioritize myself, then I'm being selfish. No. You aren't in a position to help anybody unless you are on strong footing yourself. So when someone does come to you in need, you could actually provide help. So that's my take on it, on the surface.
I think that's powerful because, one of the most sophisticated distractions we have is people. And Reggie, you and I have talked about this multiple times, and I think that the potential of other people is something that sometimes we focus on. It's not the actual individual. It's not what they do. It's the potential. It's almost like finding that resounding truth in what somebody says, even though they're absolutely doing the exact opposite. When you found, I think a lot of times we fall in love with potential. We fall in love with that potential. And I think there's a tendency of us, being the savior, to some degree, but also being the fixer. And I think that when we find ourselves in that position of being the savior or being the fixer or being the guide, I think we lose ourselves because we're helping this person find their way, or we're thinking we're helping them, when in reality I feel like we're almost taking ourselves off target, and we're now kind of functioning as creating their life, instead of ours. And I feel like we kind of become on the sidelines to some degree. And then when we do get let down, then there's a whole nother conundrum.
Correct. And I find that one of the biggest tools that you can use to put all this in perspective is to simply ask that individual, so what is it that you believe you need to do next? And that will either give them pause to take responsibility for their own future or not, or to just simply admit they're not ready to take the step. Okay, fine. Well, let me know when you make a decision and we can talk again. But you don't have to pick up their dream and push it forward. There's a phrase in an old song called The Color of Roses. Bette Midler sort of made it popular, but she's not the only one who recorded it. And the part of it that I always remembered is, only the ones who believe ever see what they dream, ever dream what comes true. if you ever get a chance to listen to the song, it's fabulous. But what it says to me is you have to have a vision. That person with potential has to have a vision to go with it. And if they can't see that vision or they can't express that vision, then it all remains a fantasy. But if they connect that vision to their dream, they can actually make that manifest into something real. It may not be as bright and brilliant as they originally thought, but it'll be something. But again, they have to take the steps. And that's why when the song says, only the one who believes, it didn't say about you and me and everybody else, but the person with the dream is the only one who can make that a reality.
That's powerful, and I agree with you. When we put a lot of energy into other people, it can be very valuable, but at the same time, it can sidestep our life. Reggie, when they've been listening to your perspective, they might want to actually read more into your book, The Anatomy of a Patient. Where can folks find that? But better yet, what is the book really targeted about?
Well, the book is really targeted about how to face the unknown. How to not collapse in the face of the unknown, how to go out aggressively and get information that you need to know in order to battle a fatal illness. How do you generate strength so that the people around you who want to help you can themselves be strong enough to help you? And all of the fascinating lessons I learned along the way of figuring that out. The book is available on Amazon.com, or you can go to my website, reggieharvey.net. That's REGGIEHARVEY.net, and find out a little bit more about the book, find out a little bit more about me, and then there's an area there for you to hot link back to Amazon so that you could purchase the book. And there's also a blog section which allows you to audit some of the previous radio casts that we've put together.
Reggie, I enjoy having you in the studio, and I can't wait to see you next week. Thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you, Ashley.
Very powerful perspective, because I think a lot of us fall into this category. A lot of us are helping people, and I think to some degree there's obviously good intent. Okay? But also part of it is that we really are trying to ignore our own problems. A lot of it's that. And I know that can be hard to digest because we've been telling ourselves for so long. And we're good people. I get that. It's not that you're not a good person. It's just though that you've been telling yourself for so long, but we've been ignoring some of the stuff that we need to do. And I'm not saying you can't help people. I'm not saying that you can't donate. I'm not saying that you can't go and give back. I'm not saying that you can't help a friend in need. But we got to put in perspective what we need to do as well. Are we overlooking our own issues or our own problems or our own happiness? Or are we overlooking our own getting to the core of ourselves and understanding ourselves? When I return, I'll be talking more about distractions and how you can recognize them in your life right now. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
You could be my luck. Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we've been recognizing distractions, the distractions in your own life. What are the distractions? How and why do we create them? How do we allow these distractions in our life? And right now, I really want to focus on really seeing the distractions. Until we actually recognize that we have distractions in our own life, we don't even know it. We really don't. And like I was saying before the break, we can do things for other people. We can do things out of the goodness of our own heart. We can do things to help other people, but it has to be in perspective. It has to be in moderation. You've got to actually think about yourself as well. When I'm working with clients in my office, a lot of times I hear from some of my clients, I've been helping so-and-so, or I'm dating somebody, but they're dealing with this, and they're dealing with this, and they're dealing with that. And what happens is that this distraction, which really is a lot of a distraction, begins to take over their whole life. It begins to take over their entire life. And they're not able to really focus on their own life. And a lot of that has been created by them. Do you see what I'm saying? A lot of that is created by them. And because it's created by them, it's like a subconscious thing. Like our mind doesn't want to let us know that, yes, indeed, this is a distraction that we have created so that we are not really focusing on the fact that we really, truly are not happy in our own life, that we really, truly are dealing with codependency in our life, and we're always looking for acceptance from other people, and we're not getting that, and so we're feeling sad, depressed, lonely, beaten down. We're feeling like an outsider in our own life. And we got to get to that. Like when people talk about alcohol addiction, drug addiction, pharmaceutical prescription drug addiction, that's just a Band-Aid. That's just a symptom of the situation. And that symptom is a distraction. You see what I'm saying? Because if we continue to drink or to drug, we're not focusing on what we need to change at all. But even more than that, what happens is we have a purpose. We're avoiding said purpose. We're not dealing with it because we have issues that we need to deal with. So we're self-medicating, which becomes a distraction, right, which is the Band-Aid. And then what happens with that distraction, right, is that it begins to get out of hand more and more and more, and we're spending more and more time doing it. And then when we wake up the next day, we're feeling really bad. We're feeling really sad. We're feeling sadness, depression. We're feeling, down about ourselves. We're feeling in negative vulnerability, because there is some forms of vulnerability that is very good, but we're also feeling shame. And so it's like this never-ending negative cycle of offsetting our potential, offsetting our purpose, trying to fill a void that we haven't looked into because we're using this distraction, not doing it, waking up feeling shame again, going through that cycle of beating oneself up again, and then going back down the next path later on that evening. And so you can see how this begins to take a toll on someone's life. The distraction is the same if it's a person. If you have a person in your life that you're trying to take care of, and maybe their life is out of control and they really need some professional help. Okay, when we try to help them, what are we doing here? We're getting in the way of them getting the help that they probably need. But isn't there more? Yes, indeed, we want to help, and yes, indeed, we care. But there's also a point where we got to step back and say, okay, I know that I got into this relationship because I do believe that I want to help this person. But a lot of times, if you go right before that relationship, if you look back into your mind's eye, if you go back into it, you're going to see that you weren't really that happy. You're going to begin to realize a lot of things about your life. You're going to be able to realize that this person that you brought into your life, that you allowed into your life, is a massive distraction. You're not looking at your own life. You're not taking care of your own things. You haven't filled that hole within you. And you're actually trying to fill that hole with this person. And that doesn't work. Because the thing is that we can't fill ourselves with someone else. That doesn't work. That's not the way it works. And because they're in the state of mind that they're in, doing what they're doing, they have a hole within them too. And so you begin to look for acceptance from a person that can't even accept you. That's the thing. I can't accept you if I can't accept myself. I don't even know what that is. I mean, seriously, think about the implications that I'm talking about right now. And that's the power of this. That's the power of the stuff that we got to figure out. That's the power, is that when there's a trigger, when we have these distractions, when these distractions take over, what were we thinking up right before? What were we dealing with right before? What were the hard things that we were thinking about? What were some of the negative thoughts that were going on in our mind? What was going on before we decided to self-medicate? What was going on before we decided to eat a bunch of food? What was going on before we decided to take on this relationship and to try to save them? Remember, we can't save other people. We can only save ourselves. And I know that sounds harsh, but each person has to be willing to save themselves and take responsibility for their own life. It's not different. It's always going to be that way. I wish I could tell you differently, but I can't. I tell you the truth on this show. And so we can't save other people. We can try to help them along the way, but they have to see their own truth. We can try to teach them by our actions, not by our words, but by our actions. But again, they have to take that in. We can't drink the water for them. We can show them where it is, but we can't drink the water for them. You know, last but not least is that when we're dealing with this stuff and we have these distractions, and what happens is when it's a person and the person becomes a distraction, our life becomes like overwhelming, insurmountable, problem issues. We get overwhelmed. We just don't know what to do next. And a lot of times when I'm in sessions with clients, they're talking about how, they're dealing with this or they're dealing with this, or, this relationship has now gotten in the way of their work. This relationship is now getting in the way of them sleeping. This relationship is now causing these problems. So think about it. This distraction that we've created under the mask of helping, which was also part of the ego, which wanted to save the person, is literally avoiding dealing with oneself because our issues seem overwhelming. We don't want to deal with it. It's almost like me being at the house trying to finish a project, and instead I find myself washing clothes, vacuuming. Not that that's not a good thing, but I needed to be working on the project. And the project didn't go away. And the same thing is here. No matter what distractions we have in our life, no matter what we're dealing with in our life, the stuff that we have to deal with isn't ever going to go away. We got to deal with it. And the farther and farther we push it back on that back burner, the longer we wait, the more challenging it becomes. We can still take it on and we can still deal with it, but eventually we have to come to terms with the fact that it's time. And that more importantly that it's time, that you are actually worth dealing with it. Because we have to find our worth to be able to explore that in our own life. I hope this show has helped you. Please share it with your family and friends. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 3 shakes.